Hey everyone, and welcome to our Give Live webinar. I'm Matt Cromwell, Head of Support at GiveWP.com and WordPress.com. Today we're going to talk about leveling up your nonprofit website with best practices and tips and tricks. But first, we have a surprise special guest, Impromptu. He's with us today. He's actually here in our office, as you can see. It's Carl Alexander. He's here. Carl's an excellent, highly skilled developer who loves WordPress and the WordPress community as a whole. Carl and I go way back when, in dog years, it's like 100 years. And it's always a delight to see Carl, so glad you're here, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me over. Yeah, just a bit about myself. I'm Carl Alexander. I write at carlalexander.ca. I've been involved with WordPress for over, I want to say a bit over a decade now. I've been a WordCamp Montreal organizer for, this is going to be my 8th year. It's our 10th WordCamp. We're as old as Miami, if you can believe that. We're a really old WordCamp and a really, really old community. So I've been really involved with WordPress a lot, and Matt's been really great getting me involved with the larger community, especially in the States. I've only started coming to the States, I'd say, like 2 years now. Like, WordCamp US, the first one was like kind of my first US WordCamp. That was in 2015, and then I've been slowly ramping up TalkCamp, more WordCamp in the United States. I'm trying to do all the big cities, all the big city WordCamps. So I spoke in Phoenix 2 weekends ago, and then I was a backup speaker in Austin as well the weekend before that. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. And Carl is going to talk with us a lot about this stuff. And it's so great that you're here. Thanks so much. We'll start broadly. And just as an overview, I just want to give you kind of like an outline of what we're going to go through today. As we said in the comments, we have the live chat over there on the side. As soon as you're here, hey folks, I see Alan DeJong. Thanks for being here from Texas.
I was just there. I went to the Space Center when I was in Austin. It was great.
Are you an Astros fan, Alan? I hope that was a big win for you guys. So good job there. Real quick, here's an overview. We're going to talk about website security. We're going to talk about hosting. We're going to talk about how to choose plugins and themes. We're going to talk about maintaining a blog. We're going to talk about donation forms, and then we're going to keep it all the way open. So if you have questions at all about anything that's really bugging you on your website, chime in on the live chat, and we'll integrate that into the outline overall. But that's the quick overview of what we're going to talk about, kind of the high points of everything. Alan says he is an Astros fan, so awesome. Congrats, guys. That was a big win. That was super awesome. Although I'm not a Dodger fan, but they are from California, so I was kind of rooting for the Dodgers, I have to say. San Diego Padres, we haven't been there in a long time. So. Anyway, cool. All right, so first we're going to talk about security. Security. I always start every single time I talk about best practices for a website, I start with security. Because without that, it's like, you can lose your site at any time.
Yeah, I mean, even me as like a WordCamp organizer, I really feel that each WordCamp should have like a security talk. Like, I feel that it's a topic that even if you do it all the time, like even if it's like repeated and people are like, oh no, not a security talk, there's still new people. Like every time that I'm at a WordCamp and they do a show of hands to see like who's first, is it their first WordCamp? Like easily half the room like raises their hand, which is awesome, by the way. Like it's crazy that after like all this time, like there's still so many new people at these WordCamps. But that means that like for a lot of these, a lot of people that are first attending WordCamp, they might not be so familiar with like security practices and things like that. And I think that's super important. Actually, that was like the first talk I ever gave was a WordCamp security, WordPress security. And it was a non-technical one, so it was really best practices and things like that.
Do you have like I always say there's no silver bullet when it comes to security, but is there like something you're like, you have to make sure that this one thing is always there? Like,
yeah, I mean, security is like you have like kind of this leaky dam, and then you're trying to plug holes really with your fingers. But yeah, there's always like a few good practices that Some of them that the WordPress Codex recommends that are really good. You shouldn't use, for example, like your administrator account shouldn't be admin or administrator. Make it something else. I really recommend, like, I know we'll talk about plugins a bit later, but like a two-factor authentication plugin is super useful, because really what you're worried about, as for most people, is like these kind of automated bots that are just kind of scanning for like either like old versions of WordPress. Always update your WordPress.
So just back up super quick. So those who don't know, a two-factor authentication is, I'm sure you've seen it in different places, where even your Twitter account nowadays will say that they want to text you for every time you log into your website. That's basically a two-factor authentication type of thing. So you log in with your username and password, but then it's like, oh, hey, give us a security key that we just texted you. That's one form of two-factor authentication. There's lots of different forms, but it's basically saying that we want to send you a special key in a different format outside of the website for you to authenticate that way. That's what two-factor authentication is.
Yeah, it's an additional key that changes like every minute or 30 seconds, really, to just add this kind of extra layer. But also, like, it's really useful because it trips out a lot of these kind of automated attacks where they're just going to come in and do something what we call like a dictionary attack, which is like they just have like hundreds of thousands of known passwords, and they'll just try them all and in a rapid succession. So it helps with that, because even if they figure out, even if your password is in that list, they'll still need that other code to get in. So it's very useful for that.
Cool. Yesterday we were chatting a little bit about security, and you mentioned something about I forget exactly the way you said it, but basically people are the biggest problem.
Yeah. So that I find that usually your weakness is always going to be what they call like social engineering. So like they'll find ways to either get information about you, and then they'll, for example, like if your birthday or like your hometown is like around, like they'll know like, okay, this could be a password. Or I know I was talking like a more advanced kind of like CIA level kind of thing, where like they would just commandeer an entire like kind of shop and just put these bogus like USB keys in it. But usually people are more the problem than the server or the software. Or the software itself. So
like choosing like a password, like password 123, like
password 123. Using admin. That's why a lot of the recommendations that I make initially to new people in the WordPress community are really recommendations for people. So another one that we talked yesterday was the principle of least privilege, which is, to explain simply, the principle of least privilege is just to say, I will only have what I need. Like if I have let's say I have a blog and I just write on this blog, then I should not have access to the administration, like the rest of the admin, the WordPress admin. And that's something that I apply even on my own blog. So I've like, my own blog has 2 accounts. One that I use to write, which can only do writing related things. And I have an administrator one for like the rare occasions where I need to go in and either, tweak the title of my site or like do like a small SEO change or something like that. Then I log in with that. But 90% of the time, I'm with the other account, which even if they got in, they couldn't do anything. They could just delete all my posts, which please don't do that. But backups.
And then
nice. I led right into that. So backup. You got to have backups.
That to me is almost always my number one. Like if I'm going to say like if you don't do anything else at all, it's backups, because if your security is not awesome, at least you can always like get back to a certain point where to get your site back up again. The only trouble with that is if you got infected in one way or another and that gets backed up, then
if that's at the hosting level, then it'll just come back.
Every time.
I mean, backups are always useful regardless, but I find like if you've gotten infected at some point, there's lists, like on the dark web, there's lists of websites. Like you really don't want to make it get hacked once, because then you kind of like, oh, this site worked. And then they'll be like, okay, in the future, like then that kind of knowledge propagates to all these bad actors, and they just know now, and you're just more vulnerable as a result. So it's good to have backups, but you really want to kind of put the odds in your favor that you even don't get to the stage where you get infected, because after that, your life is going to be a bit more miserable from that point on.
We actually have a Give Live earlier this year where we chatted with Chris Tietzel about security. And at that time I always talk about 3 different layers of security, which is basically the domain level security, which is most often done with something like a CDN, like Cloudflare or whatnot. And then there's application level security, which is usually a plugin of some form. I really like using iTheme security personally at the application level. And then there's server level security. And so those 3 things are kind of like the trifecta in my mind of security in general. And I want to transition there into hosting a little bit. Go ahead and follow up there.
So like the application level security and the hosting security can overlap too. Like there's some things that you can, like for example, logging attempts. Like you can have a plugin that blocks. That's also a really good plugin too. Like there's one, I think it's called Limit Login Attempts. So that's really useful as well. Or if you use Jetpack, you're also protected slightly with that too, because they bought Group Protect like a year and a half ago, and so that kind of protection can be done at the application level, so with a plugin, or it can be at the server level as well. So again, for that stuff, just cover your bases. Like you said, like try to have a bit of all 3 of them, and then you should be really in a much better shape than most people.
Yep, for sure. So that's the next one that I want to talk about, transition into hosting, because your host definitely is responsible at a certain level for the security of your site. They're also responsible for a lot of other things. So for having a really great website, especially if it's a website that you're actually taking donations on, that you're actually making money with one way or another, it's an investment, and you should really think about it in terms of, I want to protect this, it's important to me. Think of it as the hosting package itself as a really nice car. Like it's not, you don't want a really cheap car to run all of your business on. So sometimes if you're paying like $3 a month, that alone is a red flag. I'm not going to say that like globally across all of those hosts that do like things that cheap, but generally you get what you pay for in a lot of ways. So I always want to encourage nonprofits, especially, to really pay for their hosting because you need to rely on them for so many different things. And as part of the segue, then I would say there's definitely a sense in which they are responsible for the security of your website. They might even be offering backups. Your host can offer backups for you. They have protection in some ways for you. If you're on a $3 host, you have a problem often that's called a noisy neighbor, but it's not only a noisy neighbor problem, but sometimes it can also be a vulnerable neighbor. You want to talk about that?
I mean, even just, I'll do a quick seg back to the security and back. Like with those $3 hosting, you have like what you call, I think security calls them that, like kitchen soup servers. So you can get, because you're sharing, like, imagine you're in an apartment, right? And nobody likes bed bugs, right? Nobody wants bed bugs. If your neighbor gets bed bugs, you might get bed bugs just because you're in the same building as them. So when you're $3 hosting and you're sharing this server with somebody else, if somebody else gets infected, you might get infected due to no cause of your own. Like regardless of like all the best practices that we talked earlier, you might still get infected. So yeah, for sure, like try to stay away from shared hosting unless it's really like a big player that kind of knows like you're not supposed to do that, or they kind of contain things much better. But yeah, I mean, I'm on a crusade for the hosting stuff. Like I wrote a blog post it was for this just before 2 years ago. It was like how to give your clients a kind of Apple experience. Like your car analogy is like so good because you're gonna pay thousands of dollars to design this beautiful website. You know, it's like kind of like a car, like you have like this giant, beautiful Ferrari chassis, and then inside you're gonna put a golf cart engine.
Yeah.
And then that's pretty much what happens with a server. It's you pay thousands and thousands of dollars to get a beautiful website, and then you get a really cheap server, and this impacts the perception of your website. Like if the website, I'm not gonna rehash all the reasons why like having a slow website is bad, but it changes the perception. It changes the perception. My point of view was it changes the perception of like the developer, because then the client, like the nonprofit, think that the developer didn't do a good job, when in fact they probably did, but it's just like because your hosting is bad, it seems like your entire site is bad. So it's worth like, like bumping it up, like consider like something that's like $20 a month or something like that, which is not like that crazy if you think about it. Like that's like, 3 Starbucks coffees, maybe even less than that, depending if you get like one of the specialty ones. So
yeah, I mean, I pay $10 a month for Netflix, and I think my website is far more valuable to me than Netflix is.
Exactly. So it's like 2 Netflixes. So it's not that bad, and it really does. It's really important as well. I think hosting is often devalued because I find that developers and people that work on projects don't really understand necessarily how to project the value of the web server to you, the client, and because they don't understand, they just think, oh well, I can get the cheapest option and get away with things. When I think it's almost as valuable as like the $20,000 or how much you pay to get a site built.
Yep. Yeah, another aspect of hosting is really, which you hinted at just a minute ago, is the speed that they can provide. Basically, there is a technical part of it that's called time to first
byte.
Exactly. Time to first byte, and that's controlled entirely 100% not by WordPress but by your host. And if the time to first byte for your host is a couple seconds, that's several seconds that your visitors spend every single time they hit your site before anything can even load at all. And that's when they start to get tired and to bail. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of explained it, like without going to the technicalities. Like really, time to first byte is really like if you press enter on your keyboard, you're like givewp.com, press enter. It's the time between you pressing enter and the where you're hosting it, and the host saying, hey, I am actually here, but I haven't told you anything yet. So if that takes a while, then obviously like everything's delayed. But yeah, that's just one of many website performance aspects. It's definitely an important one but even then, like having a slow time to first byte like can hint at various problems. So it's like, it's not necessarily the host's fault as well. Could be a whole bunch of different issues, but obviously
could be related to the
domain, where you have internet right now, like where they sending the traffic first, things like that. That's why having something like Cloudflare super useful also, because that will help at that level. Because what Cloudflare will do is it sits between your host and your browser. So instead of your browser having to talk to your host, it's going to talk to Cloudflare, so you can just bump it up. And Cloudflare is always going to be a fast response time. So that's really a good way, like to ensure having a speedy website is just to use Cloudflare in front of it. It's free. Like they have a free tier. So
it's really powerful free tier. They have a lot of paid features as well, but the free one is really, really useful. I use it on my personal website. I use it for any nonprofit that I'm helping out. I set them up with that. Just to back up a little bit, Cloudflare is what's called a CDN, a content distribution network. And basically what they're doing is they store a flat file version of your website on servers kind of throughout the world. So Carl's in Canada, he's over in Montreal. And if he's visiting GiveWP, Cloudflare would serve it to him in the closest server they have to Montreal. But when I go to GiveWP, it's going to serve it to me in the closest server they have to San Diego. and that goes also for Japan or India or wherever. And it just means that time to first byte is a lot slower. A lot quicker, and they serve it up a lot faster. They also provide some security features as well, which is really great. So you get security at that level and a little bit of a speed boost as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very useful.
Other things that I always say about hosting when it comes to WordPress websites, one thing I always say is at this stage in web development, if your host does not provide free SSL certificates, I suggest you bail. I suggest you look for a new host.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. SSL is important from an SEO perspective. Google will rank you higher. How much higher, if you have SSL or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they do say that they use it as a signal in their search algorithm. So there's that if you're worried. So it's useful to have it from an SEO perspective. It's also super useful from a server perspective as well. I won't get too much into the details, but there's something called HTTP2, which is basically the method that a host and your browser use to communicate. And the newer version that's being slowly rolled out, I think a large majority of at least the premium hosts support it now. But one of the requirements for this new type of communication that is way faster, it's when I implemented it for a client, I think we sped it up easily by 2 times by using that. But one of the hard requirements with that communication is a SSL certificate. You can't have HTTP2 without an SSL certificate. It's kind of baked into the protocol.
Alan is asking if we have recommendations on host companies that provide SSL. So I will recommend a couple, just because nowadays, like I said, any of the really popular WordPress hosts do provide that for free. And those are specifically SiteGround does, WP Engine does, Kinsta does, Pagely does, even GoDaddy provides that at certain levels, and the list goes on really. I believe in Bluehost does as well. All of those are definitely doing the right thing when it comes to SSL lately.
SiteGround comes to mind. I know when I was doing initial talks on like HTTP2 and SSL, they were like one of the first players to kind of offer that, and they do have like good pricing too. So those are the ones. Obviously, like the premium ones at this point all have it, like Pantheon, WP Engine, GoDaddy. At least their managed platform. Well, WP Engine just does manage, but GoDaddy has a kind of managed WP platform now, and they have SSL. I can't speak for like their other server, their other hosting options, but those are the ones I'm really familiar with.
Yep, definitely. Nancy White is here. She says InMotion does as well. That's true. I know that as well. They're reputable for that as well. Donald says, I 100% agree with your comments on hosting with us and persist with I'm not sure who that is, but the sister company Hosting Nation has been hosting my sites for many years. Cool.
I think Hosting with Us is the name of the hosting.
Oh, I've never heard of them.
Yeah, me neither.
Cool. The other feature that is a newer feature for hosts, but it's one that I'm saying that it's pretty much required if you have a WordPress website, is a staging environment. This is kind of more of, back in the day, it was really complex to get a staging environment set up. But now, especially with managed WordPress hosts, they pretty much all of them nowadays have this feature. And what that basically is if your site is, for example, givewp.com, they'll basically say, create a staging site, and you hit, all right, do it, create my staging site. And then what they will do is automatically, it takes, depending on how large your site is, it takes a while, maybe up to 5-10 minutes. They'll create a duplicate of your site on a specific URL, usually something like staging.givewp.com or staging.wpengine.givewp. And those that environment is now separate from your website, that you don't have to share that with anybody, and if nobody knows what that URL is, they won't ever get there. And that's a kind of a safe place that you can do all of your updates, change things up, experiment with a new theme if you want. And if you don't like it, you can trash it and create another staging environment and try it all over again. The really, really premium hosts, they allow you to create a staging environment. You can make all the changes you want there, and then you can push that back to the live site. Push those changes back to the live site. So it's a two-way communication, not just one-way communication. That gets really, really tricky when it comes to anything with e-commerce or forms at all, really, because if you got a bunch of form submissions on your live site, they didn't happen on the staging site, and so when you push it, you're gonna lose those. So that's a bit problematic. So you have to be careful about those things. But in general, I find more and more that having a dedicated staging feature of your host is almost 100% necessary for nonprofit organizations. Do you have comments about staging? That kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a developer, they're kind of required just because they're a way to test your code to make sure that things don't break. They're a way to test changes to the website. Like it's just a good practice. They're kind of like, you can see it as like a dry run before you make a permanent change to your website. And it's really a good way, like if you're dealing with clients, it's a good way to see the code. Or like if you're a nonprofit and you're dealing with contractors, it's a good way to see like what they're building without impacting your own website, which is super important because you're there, you're promoting yourself, things like that. You don't want to just arrive, get some changes from your contractor, push them out, and realize it broke your site, and then you're kind of like scrambling, trying to you're freaking out, and you're like, oh no, like what do I do? With a staging site, you can just do that, and then it breaks the site, and you're like, okay, whatever. And then you just talk to them, and it says like, hey, I updated the plugin you built. Now my staging site doesn't work. At least it's just your staging site. Yeah. It's not your live site.
Yeah, really good.
You're not losing on donations. Like, those problems cost money. So it's really I think it's a really important feature. I mean, I've never worked with no staging site, so I can't even imagine that world. But I know for clients and people that are as familiar with kind of the technical kind of workflow or the more professional technical workflow, they don't know that it's actually possible to have like this kind of copy of a website. And like you said, nowadays, due to changes to like servers and things like that, it's very cheap and easy for a host to automate that process and do it for you. So you can build a staging site, test things, delete it, rebuild it. It's very flexible.
Yep.
So that's another perk of using these kind of higher end hosting companies, because with a staging site, I know WP Engine has a staging site feature. Pantheon's even crazier, but that platform is a bit more developer friendly than necessarily non-technical friendly. But I still those are the guys that I recommend the most usually. I assume the managed GoDaddy probably does the staging. I don't know if you know.
Staging,
yeah. I can't speak for SiteGround.
SiteGround does.
Okay, SiteGround.
Staging. Yep.
Yes. So let's go SiteGround.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see.
I saw Sunil mention Let's Encrypt, and it is super complicated, but that's what powers most of these like free SSLs now that hosts offer. But yeah, it's way more complicated to manage like at the server level, because just for people that are not familiar with Let's Encrypt, it's a non-profit. I'll call it a non-profit, but it's like an organization that decided like, we want a more secure web, and the way that we can do that is by offering SSL certificates to everyone so that they can just have them for free, and they don't have to pay. Because before that, it was like, I think a minimum of $10 to get a SSL certificate, and people are like, I don't need $10. I mean, we talk about like people like, paying $3 for a host. Like you tell them like, why do I need this? What does this do? Like, why do I need my site to be secure and things like that? And they wouldn't do it. But now that it's free, it lets the hosting companies pick up and just offer it. And just because they're competing with the other hosting companies, the minute one hosting company does it, they're pressured to do it, and then it kind of builds off that. But yeah, if you're trying to do it yourself, it's rather complicated to get working and things like that.
Yep. Let's move on to the next one. We want to talk a little bit about choosing good plugins and themes. I know for pretty much anybody who is building a WordPress site on their own, whether you're the church secretary and they're like, hey, we need a website and you're going to build it for us, or if you're a beginner freelancer, or if you're just a volunteer for our organization and they say we need help with our WordPress site and we want to do this and that and the other. Any of those types of situations, you're going to end up looking to install plugins most likely, or if you're going to refresh the site, you're going to look for themes. Mm-hmm. This is a very common kind of pain point for most WordPress users. So I just want to speak a little bit into how to basically evaluate and choose your best plugins and themes. I'll jump in just real quick a little bit. So of course, if you're familiar with WordPress, you hopefully know about WordPress.org, where all the free plugins and themes are hosted. And there are definitely other marketplaces outside of WordPress.org, but they're kind of the go-to. And generally speaking, there's several kind of like indicators that will help you understand how reliable a plugin is. I'll start there. One is basically you get to see the author of that plugin on WordPress.org, and you can click on that author and see how many other plugins they've created. If they just created one plugin, and it still could be excellent, so you might want to look at other indicators if they've only created one plugin. But if you see that they've created 20 plugins and they all seem to be used a lot, that might be an indicator that it's reputable, that the author is reputable. Another one is you can see how many active installs that plugin has. WordPress basically tracks how many sites are asking for updates for that plugin, and that's what they call an active install. And they will indicate how many websites that plugin is on. So currently, right now, for example, Give is installed on over 30,000 websites. And for us, as a donation plugin, that's a big number. If you're an SEO plugin, for example, every single WordPress site in the world needs an SEO plugin, basically. And so you'll see millions of active installs for the popular SEO plugins. But for a plugin that is not needed on every single website, 30,000 is a big number, and we're really happy with that. So you can judge by their active installs. You can judge by their reviews. There's reviews on there as well. You can look and see how many reviews they have. And honestly, you can even look at the negative reviews or the neutral reviews, the 3 stars and the 1 stars, and just see what people have said about it. Because you might install the plugin and somebody says, oh, it's trash, it doesn't even install. And you're like, well, I didn't have that problem. So obviously that review is not as relevant. Or you might notice that the plugin author responded to the negative review and said, oh, this and that and the other, sorry to hear that kind of thing. Or they said, oh, you're a piece of trash, I can't believe you're trashing that plugin. That might really influence the way you think about that plugin and that company, essentially. So these are, of course, all things that I pay a lot of attention to because that's kind of my domain. That's where I live, is helping out on the support forum and on the reviews and all those things. So those are good indicators. Then, of course, we just talked about staging. If you have a staging environment, all you have to do is just get on your staging environment and then install it and play with it. That's really, for me, the best way to evaluate a plugin. Yeah. To spin it up on your staging environment and have fun with it and see what happens.
Play with it. Yeah. Play with it. See like what happens. I like with the reviews too. You want to see like support forums, like how many support tickets were created on like WordPress.org, how many were resolved, just to see the activity. Sometimes some plugins are just well made and they haven't been updated in a long time, but they're still solid and they do what they're supposed to do and there's no issues. And but the author might not be as present anymore, but they still work a lot. So like the active installs, I'm always worried. I'm a developer, so I'm always more like, I'm gonna go download it, look at how it's like, I'm gonna go look at the guts of the plugin and see like how it's built. I know that from my professional work, I'm always worried like, hey, couldn't we just do this with this plugin? And then I look at it, and one, it's not super well made. Second, it can cause I'm trying to find a better way that's like more PC, but like what I call plugin addiction, which is your site you'll start using this plugin, and then once you stop using it and you disable it, it breaks your site because your site has become addicted to this plugin, and you lose this ability to change it or to switch to another platform, and that can be very problematic for people because they get, and if you make a hasty decision and you're just like, oh, I got it to work and things like that, and then after that you're like, ah, crap, like now I'm stuck with this forever. So I'm always worried about that. Yeah, I really try to do like a really good audit with clients if I'm gonna use a plugin as a solution, just because of that, because you really don't want them to get stuck with that. Because one, after that, you end up having to support this plugin, and that can cause you a lot of headaches. So it's worth being a bit upfront about it and doing some auditing about it.
Donald asked a really good question that kind of bridges the gap between plugins and themes. He says, what's your opinion of plugin themes that are designed with Visual Composer? Basically, it's a theme that basically is powered really strongly by Visual Composer. These are really, really popular on ThemeForest, and Code Canyon is where Visual Composer is available, and often a theme is basically shipped with Visual Composer as a requirement in one way or another. And for those who don't know, Visual Composer is basically a plugin that allows you to build out complex layouts on your pages and posts.
Beaver Builder also is like that. Like Beaver Builder.
Visual Composer is like the first to market kind of page builder. It was built a long time ago, and I don't like it all that much.
That's the thing.
It's come a long way.
It's come a long way, but again, Visual Composer is actually a good kind of tangent to what I was saying. When you use a plugin like Visual Composer, you are definitely making your website dependent on it. Moving away from Visual Composer afterwards means I need to find a new theme, and possibly like redo a lot of my content depending on how you built it. With Visual Composer, you might be stuck having to extract that content, moving it to pages or things like that. So Visual Composer is kind of this good example of like, it's super good for the client to use because they feel empowered by it and they can make changes. But from a technical kind of long-term point of view, you have this problem after that. If you want to move away from Visual Composer to something else or just something more standard, it becomes a lot harder to do. Which is,
I haven't noticed yet if they have updated this yet with Visual Composer, but the direction that all the other page builders are going is that they would have more of a you could do it in the back end page edit screen. But they also have like a front end layout designer. And Beaver Builder is really strong with this. Divi is also really strong with this. Elementor is a newer one.
I haven't heard of those. Divi.
Bold Grid is another one. And the direction they're all going is, especially with Visual Composer, it's really difficult to conceptualize what your page is going to look like when you're just basically fidgeting with these blocks in the back end. It's hard to know what's going to happen.
Seeing like what the final product is.
So these page builders are moving more towards trying to make it like you edit and you see the results immediately. I do tend to like those better, but kind of across the board with all page builders, the thing you're always going to struggle with is it's just that they add a lot of scripts and they add a lot of markup to your page that sometimes is unnecessary or just maybe overly opinionated. but that's kind of like the nature of the beast. They kind of have to do things that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why, like, if you're going to use a solution like that, it's obviously going to have these kind of consequences. But like I said, I'm going to harp on it again. I'm more concerned on I build long-term relationships with clients and things like that. So I'm more worried of what I'd like to call future Carl, or future nonprofit. Be nice to them, be nice to your future self, and think about, try to empathize with what might be involved with moving away from a solution like that. Besides the kind of excitement that you get from, because it is exciting to have control of your website and being able to make changes and things like that. But you have to think also there will be a time in the future where you will want to move away from this, and the more you use it, the more you kind of build on it, the more work you're gonna give yourself in the future to kind of get all this stuff out. So either it'll be just more work that you have to do, or more work that you'll have to pay for.
Yep.
So there is costs as well with that.
Yep.
So,
we're actually, I can't believe it's already been 40 minutes, basically. This is what happens with me and Carl all the time.
I talk a lot.
We enjoy talking.
Yeah.
We're actually, after this, we're going to go somewhere else and talk with a bunch of other people too. So just more talking. But so I'm actually going to skip the section about the blog. Maybe I'll try to set up a Give Live, not next month, but in a couple months, just about best practices with blog creation, because I think every nonprofit should have a blog in one way or another.
Yeah.
They're really important. They're great for fresh content that Google loves to slurp up and serve to people. And it definitely is a way to engage with your donor base. Have a blog. Make sure you have a blog. Make sure it's obvious that you have a blog, and use it regularly.
Yeah, make sure that your donor base knows that their money is achieving something.
Yeah.
I think that's the coolest thing of running a blog as a nonprofit. Is hey, I gave $20 and it achieved this person got to go to school or things like that. Depending on what your nonprofit does, but it's cool to see the progress that your money is making, and how much they're improving the lives of people or our community or things like that. So yeah, for sure, always have a blog.
So let's go. We're going to jump into a little bit more specific stuff about nonprofit websites, and that, of course, is our specialty, which is the donation form, or how you get money, basically. And I'm going to jump into this. The biggest thing, I just want to cover a couple things about donation forms. And I, as head of support, I see clients every day that have lots of different types of websites that are gorgeous and wonderful. And sometimes these gorgeous and wonderful websites, you don't even know where to find the donation form. And it's really baffling sometimes that you can land on a nonprofit website and you don't know how to give money to them. And sometimes that's just because they say support us instead of donate, or sometimes it's because it's about us, and then a sub menu is support us, and from that support us
donate
page,
for us, donate to us.
There's 5 ways to support us, and one of them is donations, and that goes to another page.
So it's so far.
Yeah, so one thing I always try to say is you should evaluate how many clicks does it take to get to your donation form from anywhere on your website, especially your homepage, of course. So start with your homepage. Get to your homepage.
Should be 1 click away.
Yeah.
Should be 1 click away. It's your lifeblood. Donations are they're how you survive. They should be a permanent part of your homepage. I'm not a big fan of pop-ups, so I'm going to say don't do pop-ups, but I know they kind of work, but people, and even Google and things like that are starting to be more aware of pop-ups and how intrusive they can be. So really be careful with that. I like my middle of the ground solution. If you go to my website, I have this kind of little bar that if you start scrolling down, then it'll just kind of slowly kind of come down and just pop up, but in a very non-intrusive way, because again, you want to respect people's, if you go to a website and there's a pop-up, I'm sure it annoys a lot of people to have those pop-ups. So you don't want to be cause of a problem.
Yeah,
either.
Google's biggest issue with those, they call them interstitials, and it's basically when a pop-up takes over your whole screen 3 seconds after you've been on the page or something like that. I was actually on a site today, a charity site, and I was experimenting with their give form, and while I was clicking through the form, pretending like I was donating, a pop-up came up. And I was like, well, that's the best way to make sure nobody donates.
Yeah.
That's a real problem because they're there and they need to hit donate, and now all of a sudden they have to decide whether they want to subscribe or not, and now you bothered them in the middle. And
you should probably exclude the donation.
Yeah.
If you do run a pop-up, you should probably exclude your donation page if your pop-up plugin supports that, so that it doesn't appear on that page, because you really, like, just from a SEO and everything perspective, it's just like you want to remove obstacles to people like on that page. You want to make it as easy as possible to donate, which that's you guys' expertise. But yeah, you don't want to give them an excuse to be like, ugh, like I don't want to subscribe. What was I doing again? And then like they just like they already left. They already left. So really, you want to be careful with that.
So I always recommend that even if you're going to have a support us page, of course, there's lots of ways people can support you. They can volunteer their time. They can, promote you at different conferences and whatnot. There are lots of ways people can support you. But even if you're going to have a support page, support us page, have a second link in your navigation that says donate. I can't. If you're going to do online donations, do them and make it really clear. Have a donate button really clear. Have it in the sidebar. Have it in the menu, wherever you can. If you want to get creative with that language, like fund us, support us financially, like you can try to get creative with that if you like, but don't shy away from the word donate, because people do want to be generous, and you want to encourage them to do that and not let them wonder how they can do that. Another thing I want to talk about a bit is when they finally do get to your form, you want to make sure that your form only is asking for the information that is the minimum amount of information to donate.
That's a common mistake. I mean, again, you want to remove obstacles to them donating. So if you see you arrive and it's like, give me your address and everything, and then you're like, oh my God, like this is daunting. I'm gonna go do something. I'll give them money later. And then later becomes never.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, like let me give one example. Like PayPal, for example, is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Everybody understands PayPal, how it works. And as developers, honestly, it's sometimes really challenging to work with PayPal. So they don't necessarily have a great reputation in the development world. But one thing that's really, really convenient with PayPal is that often, in order to trigger a PayPal donation, there's really a very minimum amount of information you need in order to send money. If they have a PayPal account, all it is name and email address, and they can give you $50. So there's actually a lot of benefits to PayPal in that sense. And you can make your give form look like that too. Basically, it's just name and email address, and you hit donate now, and it will kick you over to PayPal, and that information's already filled out for them. And all they have to do is hit yes, donate. That's great. If you want to do credit cards, which is also a really, really highly beneficial thing to do, rather than kicking them over to another page where they could basically they'd be like, why am I over here if they're not familiar with PayPal? Where did I just go? I wanted to donate. Now I'm somewhere else. They often will abandon that donation. So
you see that often?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah,
for sure. It's actually a known thing. Like
I didn't know that.
There's a big abandonment rate just because you.
I figured like PayPal's been around for like so long. Like people would have interacted with them. At least once at this point.
You'd think so, but it still happens, and sometimes something could go wrong on the PayPal side. There's lots of reasons why it just might not go like they want. But if you're doing credit cards on your site, that's additional fields that they're going to have to fill out. And most often, it's optional to provide the billing address. It's often not required. So, for example, in Give, it's a setting. You can enable billing address collection or not. If you get a lot of credit cards that are flagged as potentially fraudulent, then you probably do want to enable the billing address because that helps to ensure that they are correct. That it prevents against fraud types of flagging. But if you don't really need it, don't enable it because it's less stuff to fill out.
It's unnecessary stuff. Gets in the way of you getting money. So
another thing that Give does is it allows you to have options for ways that they can give. So they can give with PayPal or they can choose credit cards. But just keep in mind that that's giving them an additional choice that they have to think about. Well, what do I want to do? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? You also can choose which one is the default. So you definitely want to make sure that the default is the one that you prefer. So if you prefer that they give with credit cards rather than PayPal, then make sure that that's the default option. So that more people are choosing that and less people are having to make that choice and click over. But you want to also make sure that that's a choice that actually matters, that actually benefits you. You might have a lot of donors who prefer PayPal. There are those who have been online and paying online for a long time and are super familiar with it.
Yeah, I kind of like PayPal. Yeah, I like PayPal. Like, I like that it's like, okay, there's only one place, where they have like my credit card on file, and it's there. Although, to be fair, most gateways, most solutions now, technical solutions, you never end up storing the credit card anymore. But it's just in the back of your mind, you're like kind of like, what if they're storing? What if they're storing my credit card information? So it depends. It depends on the person or the individual. I like PayPal a lot. It's true that they're kind of tricky to deal with from a developer perspective, but again, that's why you have plugins. They do all the heavy lifting, so you don't have to.
Exactly. Yeah, we've talked about this on Give Live a few times, but Give never collects the credit card information and always is sent securely directly to the payment gateway. So you are never storing that kind of
never legally at risk.
Yeah, it's you don't want that burden.
No, it's a very you don't want to store credit cards.
Ever.
That's why it's so easy now to accept payments online, is because people solve that problem. Because before that, it was very hard to collect money, because if you had to store the credit card, you were legally bound. Like crazy levels of security is required to maintain that. So
yep, for sure. We're going to wrap up really soon here. I have just a couple last items on donation forms. So if you have any other questions at all about anything whatsoever, type them into the chat box and we'll try to address them before we log off. Real quick, I want to talk a little bit about donation landing pages. And we actually had an article written just this week that talks about this in detail, how to build a donation landing page, and we did it with Beaver Builder. Actually, we had a guest blogger from the Beaver Builder add-ons company, and he wrote this great write-up on creating a really powerful landing page using Give and Beaver Builder and the Beaver Builder add-ons. So the whole idea with building out a powerful landing page is it's basically like a dedicated page that you want to send all of your traffic to whenever you're doing a campaign. So, for example, in just a couple of weeks, we're coming up to Giving Tuesday, which is a giant opportunity for nonprofits to raise money. Giving Tuesday is a great campaign. We have been writing about it and doing social media about it for a long time. And one of the principles we always say is your Giving Tuesday page should be its own page. It should be a dedicated page, and that you should be sending all your traffic to that one page. So whatever, examplecharity.com/givingtuesday17. That should be your page, and all of your social links should be going there. And it should be a strong call to action page like this one with a very clear donation form, really prominent. So let me skip down to the preview of the results here. They did a really great job putting this together. Here it is. So save a smile, and the donate now button is actually going to push you down the screen to the donate page, the donate form, which is right here. Really clear. They're telling why you should be donating. They're highlighting the things that they're going to do with these donations. Great imagery going on. It's a really easy layout. You can see here that the fields are as minimal as possible. There's as few fields as possible here. I believe they have this one set up that it's going to use our pop-up, our modal option. So you fill out this information and then you hit donate now, and it'll open up the pop-up for your credit card information. They show honoring our top donors, people who have donated before, and the great things they say about your cause. It's a nice result. You do something like this for, you can see the progress bars here also. They're showing a progress bar, how well the campaign is going overall. You do a campaign like this for Giving Tuesday, and it definitely will help you to level up and get a lot more success on your Giving Tuesday campaign. So donation landing pages are a big deal. I got a question here from Alan DeJong.
We also have one from Donald.
Oh, Donald.
Right.
Donald says he's in the market for a theme for a new project, and I'd like to stay away from Visual Composer. Yeah. What products will get us what you see is what you get format? Honestly, the Beaver Builder is one of them. Right now, in terms of page builders, I recommend Beaver Builder.
Yeah, that's the one that I hear the most about as well. Yeah, that one, these kind of plugin recommendations, I highly recommend talking to your peers. Like if you have other friends that are using, you know, website builders, whether it's Divi, Visual Composer, or Beaver Builder, just talk to them, see like what they like, what they didn't like, things like that, and yeah, try to set up a staging site and try it out. There's different ways to approach that.
Yep. What I like about Beaver Builder too, just wrapping that up, is they have a theme that you can use. So generally these page builders, if they don't have a theme, a dedicated theme, then they're limited to only the content area. You can only do their layouts within the content area of your existing theme. So they can't control the whole entire page. But if they have a theme that they have built also, or many themes, then they can actually do the layout for the whole entire page, any page of your site. And Beaver Builder offers that as well. So does Divi and the Divi theme. Divi Builder is the plugin, and Divi theme. Those are, it's a really good combo as well. Alan says, so I've got a site where I had to use multiple forms for layout and functionality reasons. I know that there are goals per form, however, would be interested in a goal for all forms. Alan, hit us up in support, because we have a snippet for you just for that purpose. We are looking into more of a tiered approach to goals in general. And actually that type of thing is usually done with a function called, a feature called peer-to-peer fundraising. But we have a snippet that will help you out for that, no problem. So hit us up in support, and we'll take care of you there, no problem. Cool. Thanks so much, everybody, for being on today. Carl, thanks so much for being here. High five.
Dragged this on really long, but hopefully you guys got a lot of good information out of that.
For sure.
Yeah. See you guys around.
Thanks. Do you have any other final thoughts? Anything? Best practice?
No. Security is important.
Yeah,
like,
security.
Security. That's like my siren song.
Yep.
Security is always important, and it's something that it's like running or like staying healthy. We're like, oh, I'll do it later, but later should be now.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Go to your local meetup. Go to your local WordCamp. Keep learning everything.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good one. We'll see you next month.